smart facilitator, they're the leading smart partners of this, the next think tanking session. The Deputy Prime Minister and Alan Ryder. And the reason is because we haven't yet extended with new dimensions, the strategic initiatives on financial inclusion and quality and standards. So the idea was that we would try, like we did with technology, and we'll come back on technology innovation tomorrow morning, but what we did with technology yesterday and with the vision, we will try to add new dimensions, those which are currently happening, so that if we are talking about the algorithm for smart punishable, how nations could succeed rather than fail. We are not stagnating to 2 years ago Dar es Salaam either. So Dar es Salaam took place only in July. Lots of things did take place, or they were emphasized. And they even took place this morning. Yesterday, I don't know if many things, but just referring to we had this intervention on public security, social media and all that yesterday from Demos, the think tank had. I don't know if you noticed this morning, there was further development, and it's quite Tim Berners-Lee. Have you seen that? David? Tim Berners-Lee, who kind of created the WW and internet, therefore happened and all the rest of it, was not very happy that the intelligence services, GCHQ and NSA, when they developed PRISM and other things, they've used the WW and the internet for that purpose. So now what we're talking about is we're talking about the technology innovator suddenly, well, I suppose we don't need to go any further, suddenly being very unhappy that it has been misused. Yeah. Now, all that means that dimensions to each and every of the situations that we are dealing with, as they happen back home, they need to be followed. And we're trying, one of the things that we do in the Smart Partnership movement to resonate, we're trying to keep ourselves in the loop and make connections. And it's similar thing within the financial inclusion with the central bank governors and with the quality and standard inclusion. So this afternoon we're trying to, as far as we can, we don't have central bank governors. Caleb Fundaga from Zambia may still come any moment. His travel was a little bit interrupted, but we have Deputy Prime Minister probably who could lead the discussion that we have. And there is one particular dimension, one or two dimensions that, new dimensions in which financial inclusion, there are smart partners who are prepared to make that. We may also have the former Minister of Finance of Malaysia, Tun Daim, which Omar and Chu could remind you who he was. He happens to be in town and may come, and that will be very useful too. So this is on the financial inclusion. We should share the time, about an hour and a half until about 4:45, between the new issues on quality and the new issues on finance. So the only thing I wanted to say from my point of view is that more and more, not because my background is more on the engineering system, but more and more when you look to all these many statements from top civil servants or ministers or Chief Executive Bureau standards, there are these statements that we need to deal with complexity. Everything is so complex, so interconnected. And we were saying that, in a way, the smart partnership with the links and everything else, it almost worked like an engineering human system, almost. And if it does, because of networks, if it does, then it has all sorts of facets and characteristics, yeah? In addition to resilience and all sorts of others, which I was asking Alan to a little bit use his engineering background. There is a very, very good overview about human needs and complex technological work. But the only thing what I would like to say is while we are interested in complexity as a field, to deal with economics and networks are part of that, and pattern formation with algorithms are that. In fact, everything is done for the purpose of simplicity. It's for the purpose of simple governance, simple, and the simplicity related to individual and the network. So, but the system, the engineering system, the way they work, are quite an inspiration more and more for governance as a whole in a country. So it might be useful to a little bit maybe, because we are in a think tanking mode, think tanking slow. Did I say that? Yeah. So, Deputy Prime Minister, and I don't know if you want to start with financial inclusion first, quality, but please.
Michaela, I like dozing after lunch. Because that is more comfortable than talking. But this is a very, I want to learn from the smart partners today, because talking about financial inclusion, when you look at the definitions of the words involved, as a grassroots person, I always think about only one thing, but I'm learning that there are quite a number of issues that are involved, and an issue that I think truly that it is also financial inclusion, for specifically for people with money. You see, there are two issues that I wanted to raise on financial inclusion. The one is on assisting those who don't have money, to raise money to be able to go to the second level that I will talk about later. That part of inclusion in many of our countries is so important, because you can bring a bank to me closer to my house, but if I don't have money to put in there, it doesn't just help. In actual fact, it becomes so difficult to understand and appreciate the need of having a bank just across me. And that, I think, is the issue in many of our developing countries, specifically on the African continent. That's why the part of financial exclusion that have been happening in our countries, specifically during and of course also after independence, is accessibility to financial facilities to raise money and to do some business. In our case, for example, you need what is called security. to be able to raise money. But then I realized that in actual fact, for an ordinary person, specifically women, they don't have 5,000 NAM dollars or Zimbabwean dollars at that time, and not now, at that time, to do their business. If you give them 100 US dollars, they can raise money to go to the bank to save money. They can do that. But then our system have excluded them. It have excluded them because the system was not open to a person who wants to earn money through borrowing and then to pay back from the money they are making. Many of our women, for example, in rural areas, have done that on their own. They have seen many of them who have become real business people, starting from 100 US dollar, building their businesses. So that inclusion in terms of demanding security by, and it's not really the central banks. The central banks are powerless in our country. I don't even think about the central banks. It is the commercial banks down there that demands many documents in Zimbabwe and many other things that you need to put, including security on the table before you are given that small loan to go and do business. In our situation, we started by thinking about what we call a development bank. But then we realized that development bank looks also at more or less the same requirements. And it caters for those who are able to write their business plan, those who are able to define how much they will earn and how much they are going to pay, and those who are able at least to forecast on what they are going to do in the next 5-7 years. The grassroots were still excluded. Now, mind you, the majority of our people that we need to talk about when we talk about financial inclusion are the grassroots people. These are the majority of the people. We went ahead and established a new one. How is it called? SME Bank. An SME Bank. Now SME, Small and Medium Enterprise Bank. I think it is also not going to work properly because because still I call them Kapana women, and these are the best, the majority of the best business people we have. The people who feed the children, the people who send the children to school, and the people who looks after old people and so on, and the community. I'm not sure that we are going to include these people. So, financial inclusion in all our countries should go down to the grassroots people, and they don't need much money. They don't need much money. The other time when I was serving in labor, we were working on with the International Labor Organization on what is called the mini they called
Grammy Bank?
no it's a very small basic bank that microfinancing that will serve the grassroots people. But of course, as we have said, when I moved from there, this idea died. And my personal opinion at that moment, at that time, was let's save the Kapana women, the people who sell on the street, food and so on, the people who met us in terms of raising families and so on. Now, indeed, this is the financial inclusion that I think our governments and our institutions in countries should look at. It's very, 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 very important. It's very, very important because then you are able to allow people who can use their brains and who can work hard to raise funds that they can go to them. The other part, of course, is a very dangerous one because it goes together with making money. And that is the banking services. I will call it, for the lack of good words, banking services. Having a bank nearer there and encouraging people to bank their money. In Tanzania, Dar es Salaam, just early this year, we learned about this e-banking and so on, and they were encouraging us to do it. Now, when you look at that component of financial services, where you want to have banks for people to bank their money, one of the disadvantages that I have seen and that we have to address as governments and indeed as private sector and as smart partners is the type of requirements that minimize the number the amount of money you are put in the bank. One of our participants this morning was talking about you put in 500 and after 3 months when you go there you have got 300 NAM dollars or US dollars or Zimbabwean dollars because the charges is so high. And our ordinary people don't understand that. One person was nearly fighting. She said, no. I brought in 100 NAM dollars. Now you are telling me there is only 50. No, you see, there is service charge. Now they don't understand what is service charge. Because when we put our money under the pillow, it remains there as $100. Even after 10 years, it is $100 still. But here in the bank, you put it in and then it reduces the amount.
In fact, it's less than $100.
It's less than, it is true. The charges are so high. The charges are so high. Now, together with that goes the new business ventures, which is going together with technological development. You see, I don't know when I'm making e-banking, how many charges I am paying. I pay the service for the cell phone, and then I pay the service for the banking. You see, in actual fact, in the end, you are on the disadvantage. Now, I will tell you a story. That the problem we have is that those who are selling these products, they are selling this product for profit. And they don't realize that there are people who cannot afford paying all those services. And indeed, when they sell their products, they tell you a good story. Recently, we had a submission in our cabinet, and that submission was requiring, came from the Ministry of Labor and Social Welfare, which pays old age funds, old age grants, disabled grants, and orphan grants. At present moment, we contracted a company which is paying out doing these services. And the submission came and they wanted us to move from that system to another system where this company will pay the money directly in the accounts of the people who are beneficiaries. And then we asked a question, how do you come? Why are you changing a system without making a study? what is the cost benefit between the two systems? And where do you have a bank in the rural area where there is no bank, 100 kilometers from the bank? So you want that person to go to the bank 100 kilometers and then draw money there and pay, a lift to go back home. What is the cost benefit? There was no cost benefit. But in the final analysis, it is that there are people selling these products who always think about how much can I make out of them, but not about what is the benefit to the beneficiaries that I'm trying to assist. Now, in our situation, we find at least to depend more on our post office bank, because we have convinced them not to charge exorbitant service fees. And we have convinced them on that. We have also convinced them not to drop some of the requirements that the commercial banks normal requires. And elderly people, for example, have got more access to bank services within the post office. So if they take $100 there and they go back after a few months, they still have $100. They still have $100. But then, indeed, the opposite from the commercial bank is totally different. They will lose everything that they have if they take their money there. Our conclusion in terms of financial inclusiveness is, let's make sure that indeed products in terms of banks, specifically in depositing and saving money, does fit individuals who are not well off in terms of earning money, because our old age people, elderly people earns 515 Namibia dollar. Now, if they lose a small amount from that, it becomes so reduced that they cannot, maintain themselves. And let's look at financial inclusion in terms of the accessibility to financial facilities to earn money in small businesses by grassroots people, if it is possible, so that they can be able to earn, to borrow a small amount of money and make another small amount of money, a little bit more than what they have borrowed, to pay back at the same time, but also to leave something for themselves. So, Michaela, Smart Partners, this is the idea that I wanted to talk about. But honestly speaking, I feel so empty on these issues that I would like to learn from the Smart Partners on what they are doing in their countries and what their personal opinions in terms of financial inclusion. Thank you very much.
When you say grassroots, put a number to grassroots. How do you know how many grassroots?
Yeah, Michaela, those of us who come from rural areas, we know what is grassroots. The majority of unemployed people, the majority of people who don't work in the families, the majority of people who don't earn much money. Yeah, those are the grassroots people, the ordinary people, you see. The ones who don't have a tie every day.
How many people?
Oh, yeah, that is, I think in Namibia, it is 60% or 70% of our population.
So
Yes.
Because one of the things that we observed when Central Bank Governor invited all of us at his discussion about financial inclusion plus financial strategy was there were debates about the numbers. One bank, I won't say who, said unemployment is so much, the grassroots are so many. Another one said use another number or numbers. And of course, the issue of numbers, as much as possible, requires to be not statistics, but part of the question of how do you deal. It may not be a big issue, but if one knows a few facts how to operationalize this. Because money, as you said, is not an issue because they require very small.
No, Michaela. Maybe in developed countries, what I'm saying applies to Zimbabwe, it applies to Botswana, it applies to South Africa, it applies to Angola. The majority of our people are ordinary people, grassroots people. And you know, when you go for election, that's why many parties lose elections. Because they go to higher ranking people. And there you get zero if you are not careful. You have to go down to the grassroots. It's between 60 and 70%. Yeah.
So probably one has to implement something related to financial inclusion. One
For
would have
sure.
a figure.
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes.
Okay. Well, the reason why I raised that here was because there was this new dimension, new emphasis that is being put on statistics, full numbers. Yeah? And also, on the other hand, the idea that were you to have supercomputers or whatever, you will be able to have a lot of data, every data you could want and monitor about this particular many people, the 60 or 70%, which would help one to actually satisfy the need. Yeah? So I don't know, that's a question.
No, I'm happy you have mentioned that. Michaela, you see, let me take Namibia for example. I am happy that we are here and there having some computers in schools. That's important, it's part of education. You see, I'm very happy about that and we are working hard to do that. But to tell you the truth, supercomputer where you don't have electricity does also not help.
No, the supercomputer say is in Windhoek as it is in Dar es Salaam. You don't need it out there.
No, I understand. This is what we desire. This is what we desire. When we discuss this issue as politicians, we take time to convince each other. Because first, take electricity to the township, and then think about the computer. But to take a computer there, recently I was part of the team that was sent to India to study, to attend a workshop on electronic elections. I did not like it. But because it is government instructions, I went. When I came back, I said, well, my brothers, let's forget about it. Because even those who manufactured that machine in India, they are not really doing it broadly. They don't, they are doing. But our electoral commission, they bought the machine. It is there now waiting. Now, when we discuss this issue in Parliament, I mentioned quite a number of remote areas where there is no electricity, where you travel 4 hours, for 60 kilometers, you travel 4 hours. The road is so bad. I said, if your battery gets flashed there, how long will it take you to come back and allow people to? So there are priorities that we have to look at. It is beautiful to have the beautiful things, but and recently we had this election in Kenya. I was talking to Minister Dalmas before the election. I said, yes, I understand you are going to use machines. He said, yes, yes. Just immediately after the results, I called him. I said, what happened? No, this thing have robbed us.
What is the current capability of your supercomputing useful for the like no, I don't think you know.
They're not going for a clear computer.
Look, they have a supercomputer, they will have another one.
But what do you use it for?
He will tell us what one could use it for, and then Henry will pick it up.
This morning I heard remote sensing. I mean, remote sensing is used to develop urban areas. Nobody touches on
We are
that.
only talking about
I mean, you don't want to be too academic.
we are talking about central bank governors. We have got a lot of data accumulated, and they could have even more data. If you just take the mobile banking, which is made available to various many people. No, but you need to know how many there are. I'm not pushing for supercomputer in a village. We're not doing that. I hope everybody understood that.
Let us relate it to people all the
But
time.
that is what we do. Yeah, that's all the seconds. Now we need to take new dimensions.
Thank you for that. I would like to explain supercomputer in relation to data. Because the part of supercomputer which is very well, for a long time been explained, is the one that has to do with space science and things like that. But nowadays, most of our decision, and if you can remember, since we started yesterday to discuss about this, we are talking about, for example, making decisions, design visions, based on data. Yeah, based on data.
And evidence.
And the evidence. Now, the question now comes is, we all know that this world is connected, and we contribute data by writing emails, browsing websites. Someone is capturing those data, and those data, they are using them for analysis. And those results of analysis, they use it for planning and to do many, many things. They use supercomputers to do analysis, to capture data.
In the central government. No.
In the central government. For example, let's look at micropayment mobile systems, which we have a lot of good stories in Africa on that. Being able to send money from point A to point B, the issue of remittance, is one thing. But being able to know the movement of money in the economy is another thing. And I think that helps in investment. It helps to know actually how money is moving in the country, in every day, in anyhow. To be able to do that, one needs to have a supercomputer. Those are the ones that they can help to, for example, doing it faster, or being able to capture data and store them more and things like that. So there's other applications of supercomputer which are good. But it's not necessary for every country to have supercomputer. But regional blocks, they can decide to have the center, which it can help them to...
So central bank governors particularly are usually thinking about having more updated data. That's why. And one of the aspects will be to know how many are at any point of time in the grassroots. But that doesn't mean you wouldn't have other ways to do it. No. Could we go on the pool numbers, Henry? Pool numbers and statistics, because that's connected. That's the only new dimension that we are going to bring on financial inclusion. And others we follow on quality after, yeah, because we started from the years.
Okay, those who have been with us from the beginning yesterday, I'm sure by now you understand how the program gets shifted left and right. Let me address largely the aspect of what could be newish but significant through usage of statistics. What my brother from Tanzania has just indicated is that through supercomputers we can have massive data, and we can therefore make use of such data to analyze various sectors. It goes from mineral exploration to your agriculture, to your research, to your health issues, to your financial sector, and so forth. But that is the side about the capacity through a supercomputer. And what I want to address now is a little bit about making use of data statistics. The first issue that comes to my mind, and I'm thinking of something that is relatively clear to all of us and something that we have all stumbled upon. Just think in terms of our national plans. I do not know many of you in your countries what your experience is, but I can assure you if you pick national plans, 5-year or 3-year plans of most countries, many of them, it's like an encyclopedia of what is possible, which at the end of the period, there is a very tiny portion which has been done. Planning is hardly taken very seriously in many of our countries. We do it, we employ people, but the relevance of it versus what we actually do in practice is very limited. And I feel that it's not that it's incompetence, by the way. There are many reasons. Some of them are political. The way we plan each sector says, hey, we want to do this over the next 3 years. And you can't cut anyone down. So in the end, they have a massive pile. The planning commission or ministry alone, if they try to cut, they are even put to say, hey, you have left some of the things. The way in which the plan relates to the funding possibilities over that 3 or 5 year period, there is hardly anything. And what I'm trying to say is that now that we may be able to have fairly precise data, it is far much better to readdress that sector. Have minimal major things that can be achieved over that specified period of time with a clear indication of how they can be funded and try to achieve them. So a refocus on how we do national planning, in my view, would be a very vital exercise and ensure that we try to achieve it. To complement this, there is also the management side. Let me tell you that I can give you lots of examples in my country. We have borrowed millions, hundreds of millions. We put them into digitalization of telephones in a particular area. If you go and ask anybody, say, okay, how did you expect to pay back this loan from the improved operations? There is no single data on it. But with the use of the supercomputer, we can actually indicate, so how many potential clients are we going to have? How much do we hope to raise? Is it a loan that we can finance? In that way, we actually complement our plans with a proper management system. More recently, in our own city, the main city, we have been looking at getting a massive loan from somewhere to improve the water supply situation. Massive numbers of people are not having water. But if we can improve the water supply system, they will pay for this water. If you ask anybody in that local authority to say, look, how much do you expect to raise from charging water when you have improved the system? I can assure you that data is not safe. Do you see what I'm trying to say? That as a management tool, a supercomputer, but focusing primarily on the statistics, there are lots of things that we can do and actually achieve. I can give several other examples, but I'm sure in many of your own countries, you may have some. So what I'm trying to say is, through usage of statistics, just to focus on statistics, we can revamp our planning and also revamp our management system, I think.
Okay. Sorry. Some. So also part of statistics and some.
Yeah. And then Paul, she's looking for an opportunity to say
Yeah.
something.
No, that's okay.
I'm wearing pants, that's the problem. She only.
No.
Okay, so
He raised the issue of statistics in Dar es Salaam. Yeah?
So my contribution on this subject is to do with give you some idea of the magnitude of data you have to handle in financial inclusion. For instance, in Uganda, the population is touching on 35 million people. And the estimate of the grassroots is about the same in terms of ratios as in Namibia, as indeed it is in most sub-Saharan countries. The estimate is, on average, 3/4, 75%. That is the sub-Saharan African average. So, if I ask my dear brother here to work out 3/4 of, well, it's a simple test of smart arithmetic. 3/4 of 35?
27.
Okay.
Less than 35.
About. No, don't laugh. That is an answer. And it is a working figure. Because in statistics we deal with magnitudes. It's not arithmetic. It's not mathematics. You've heard this story about the quiz between which are shown on TV. 3 contestants. There was a mathematician, statistician, and an accountant. The question was 70 times 2 is what? So the mathematician quickly said, of course, 140. The statistician, 140 plus or minus standard deviation.
Standard deviation.
And the accountant said, Mr. Accountant, why are you so quiet? He said, I didn't hear the question. He said, oh, I asked 2 times 70 is what? What do you want to hear? So you know what you want to hear. So 25 will do. So if you want, of course, some of these will be juniors, so they can't borrow. So take 25. So you have got 25 people of the grassroots. Each one wants to borrow $100 from various sources. You got a number of a mix of possible handles for assisting these people. In Uganda, we have the Ntandikwa. Government hands out people to some identified groups who are very poor. No collateral. They only pay back if they succeed. To the extent which they succeed, if it is 50%, then they pay 50% of what was given out and so on. So you got to keep a track on that group. Others they are in the circles, they form a group and they put money in the pool, and we have got to monitor who borrows, how much they borrow, how much they pay, whether it is succeeding. Others have a cooperative, which is a sort of smaller, bigger model than the circles, and so on and so forth. So you have got all these groups doing different things to track this data for purposes of estimation of demand and follow-up and managing, which is what the minister for smart minister from Zimbabwe for science and technology was talking about.
You're not honorable, you're smart
massive,
now.
big data with the smart minister. Okay, smart party. It's huge data. It is mind-boggling. So, precisely this is what you really need in order to manage big data for purposes of, first of all, tracking in this situation of financial inclusion, because there will be people who need to be tracked and shepherded along. We can see the likely failure joints in the system, detect them early and make some corrective interventions, especially in the first group where the government hands out public funds in order to help the lowest layer of the pyramid, of the financial access pyramid. So it's tracking. The second one is the forward planning. If they fail, what else can you do for them? Those who succeed, how can you uplift them to a higher level? And how much do you have to put aside or mobilize and generate and set aside ring fence for the purpose, for the future, for a period? It has to be replenished periodically by type and by purpose. So all this data has got to be, as it is, pocketed and stored and used for managing any financial intervention system for financial inclusion. And of course you have to have a long-term objective. These are short-term. In the medium term, what do you do? How many of these are moving? So it's a trend analysis so that you can plan even better and reach the ultimate objective. In Namibia, we have this dream. Because we like to see, my idea of a vision is something you can see. And in Namibia, we tried to draw the financial access figure. It was a pyramid. We said the ideal should be a diamond. So at the bottom, very, very few. At the top, very, very few. In the middle is very fat. So that is the image you want to reach ultimately. And it takes a lot of data to track that over a period of, say, 25 years, 30 years of socio-economic transformation, which is really the vision of most countries who are affiliated to the Smart Partnership Movement, for which the financial inclusion is one of the major pillars for carrying forward the national vision. That we translate this pyramid where the fat is at the bottom into the diamond where the fat is in the middle. And there are a few millionaires at the top and hardly anybody at the bottom. Thank you. That's me what I wanted to say.
Okay, we'll take a few questions and among about 10 minutes or so, right? Umpo.
Thank you, Mihaela. I think I want to make a follow-up from what the minister said, because I believe that grassroots really are the biggest challenge that we have in our countries. And as long as we continue to talk around statistics, blase, whatever, I don't dispute the supercomputers. But my argument is on the basis that if you raise the grassroots people, their income, their economy, they will create a situation of cash flow which will improve their lifestyles, and it also have an impact the economies of our countries. That's my argument. And I was sitting here and I'm saying to myself, we have these commercial banks whose charges, their interest rates are so high. And what really gets to me is that most of these profits that they make in our countries through our hard-earned monies, they don't remain there. These profits are brought to UK or wherever their headquarters are of these commercial banks. Example, Barclays Bank, whatever. And I'm sitting here and I'm saying, I wish there's somebody from National Bank, like in case of Botswana National Bank, that maybe there is time they came up with policies whereby a percentage of the profits which are being made in our countries through social responsibility, that percentage of the monies they make goes towards the creation of the corporate banks, which will service the grassroots people without them having to pay the charges which I am paying. So that the people who are getting assisted, like through social net, the social net beneficiaries, who are assisted through the postal network of post offices to get their allowances every month. if a person, they have these, like these women may tell, in Botswana we call them Mutelo. These women, they'll contribute something to have this pool of money to borrow to do something. They are assisted in a way that, I don't know, maybe this is an issue for those who have got to have professionals in the financial institution to come up in getting that money in these banks, which are for the grassroots, really for the grassroots people, to have the assistance they need to empower them and make them grow. And when they graduate from that, then they can go into the commercial banks. And then it grows from there. Because once that grassroots level is empowered with the necessary skills, because one thing about these people, when they borrow, they pay back. There are very few of these people who borrow and don't pay back. So if they have a situation where they can be assisted to have access into the financial systems, then they would be in a position to change their communities, because they'll do whatever businesses they're doing, which will be empowered, which will grow, and then very soon they'll then go into a higher level of the commercial banks. So that's my argument.
Your argument is very much it's very much based on Vision 2016 grassroots in the various. That's what it's
Thank you very much. I keep saying that why I enjoy smart partnership is that it pulls you to both extremes. You have the scientists flying in the air, and you have the grassroots staying at the ground. Now, supercomputers, I have tried to follow the two. I have been trying to catch up on WhatsApp with the boys at home. Now, recently I was trying to follow about, since we were in Dar es Salaam, about supercomputers. Until recently I came across what has shocked the Americans. They were excited that they have the biggest number of supercomputers. But because the whole competition of scientists, since the first scientists discovered the fire, which has created so much instability in the world, found that the Chinese have a supercomputer called the Tianyi 2, or if you Google Milky Way 2, which calculates 30 quadrillion calculations per second, twice as fast as the best American computer, supercomputer. Now, here you find that now the competition, the story of the scientists is not going to be what it does for the people, but who has the best. And to the writing of books, for those who read the Bible says there is no end. To the calculations into the air and into the skies, there is no end. But yesterday I told you, whatever goes up comes on the ground. Now, for us on the ground, this weekend I was with my people who are trying to access a bank. In my whole district, there is not a single person who has defaulted on a loan in history in my district. Because they fear to know that somebody, they have never sold a house or a property of those villagers. Now, the challenge which I took the bank there so that they could access a loan. A third could access because are the ones who had a title. The majority were saying, come, look at our property, look at what we have, see whether it is not worth giving a loan. They are saying they sell milk. They are earning enough income on cash milk to show that they have income to pay a loan, but they can't because of the structure of the supercomputer-minded people who are in a framework of not being able to adjust to the grassroots. Now, the governor that Mahela is talking about, the big governors which are serving the financial sector of the world don't know about mobile money, did not know about mobile money. They were very skeptical, and I now challenge all those who are in economics. If you don't know the biggest revolution that has come in the financial market is the mobile money. Because the bankers and the big bankers were depending on everybody coming to a bank. While they were, the big people who access money were there. When the telephones come and the telecom companies introduced mobile money, you don't need a bank at all. The mobile money have established small centers around the country. You go put your money on your phone and you carry millions on your phone. You can distribute it, spend it, pay anybody, and somebody can send you money. You can even bank there. There is no need for a bank account. And when we were in Tanzania, the governor said it was 5 million a day. In Uganda, it's 22 million now, outside the bank system. If somebody does not see that
How
as a
did you
normal,
get that statistic?
you got it from the bank.
No, you
You
don't
see,
need
there was even a problem. The banks even went to parliament, put a law to stop the telephone companies from. But because parliament is for the people, there is no way such a law could be supported, because it was going to deprive a solution. You know, we must have these balances. And that's why I like smart partnership, because we have both, all people from all categories of people. If we are to fly with the scientists alone, without a balance and pulling them down, we'll make mistakes. So I would like us to have this smart approach, because even Professor now is a smart, His Excellency is a smart ambassador, and of all places in Somalia. Now, if he was to take supercomputers to Somalia at this situation in the time, he will not find a room in which to put his computer. So he must go with what is practical, what can solve the solution, what can solve the problem. And I'm sorry to say, many of you have been living away from the masses. Everything is there, down there. Now, in terms of financial inclusion, most of the big companies and insurances depend on small collections.
They have data, right?
And they have data.
And you trust them.
They need to use that data. But we are talking of while you have data and you are only using it for what purpose? I'm writing a book on God as a design, or nature as a design, which is perfect and balanced. But my discovery is that the danger to humanity is the competition between the human beings themselves. And it is leading to self-destruction faster than God is set up, where He gave us a responsibility that whatever you eat, you must fertilize the soil, so that grass can grow and the tree can stand and perform its function in nature and create balance. But because of the human competition to outdo the other and take advantage of the majority, that conflict is creating us more destruction than a smart world. So I want us, when we are discussing this, the whole thing is, what is the social cost benefit? What is the relationship with what you want to do in relation to what it achieves the concern of the mass, of the population? In everything we do, while we should not we should completely, we should seriously look at the science, study it also, but put it to the test. How smart is it in relation to serving our purpose?
A very
sorry,
quick one from.
I must make this intervention here. Sorry, because I'm going to follow on both of you. I like what you heard very much. I am not against computers. Jordan, after Israel, was the first country in the Middle East to have a computer hooked 24 hours to Dayton, Ohio, in the United States.
Yeah.
But beware of statistics. In a course I did with the United States Navy, I learned one thing from the instructors, was beware of statistics. You can use them in any way you like.
Yeah.
I feel that our economic woes now has been caused by whiz kids and well-meaning professors maybe, using PowerPoint displays to say 10% here, 10% there.
Yeah.
but they've stopped being Jordanians. They were still thinking they are at Harvard or at Oxford or Cambridge, you know, and they were living, quoting statistics, not thinking about people. If WizKids came to King Hussein with such a thing in the future, of course they were also trying to qualify for the next loan from the World Bank instead of getting self-sufficient, you know, get good marks. King Hussein used to say, what is the effect on so-and-so village? If I want to know how many poor people in Jordan are, I ask the Mukhtar, the local head of the villages. They know better than any guy who runs statistics. That is not the problem. The problem is, how do I use the supercomputer to serve people? How do I use this cray computer for urban development? This is what we must think about. You're very right about planning, but we must be very sure, back it up with asking the local people, because you want to know the need of the local people. Otherwise, it becomes like an old joke about Egypt when they introduced the train. They send somebody with the train to explain how it works, etc. And one of the peasants asked, and where do you hook the cows to pull the train?
Yeah, two more, and we need to go to the quality and then we come back.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow through from what has been said. You know, the issue about grassroots. I think it's very powerful what has been said here, because we need to get down to the basics and say what is the technology that we need. It's not about replicating what has happened in more developed economies in the developing economies. Honorable Deputy Prime Minister talked about you need the electricity before the computer. But I want to say, work with what is there. You know, you don't have to make it the same as what is in the big city like in New York. Work with what is there. He talked about the mobile banking, and that is a serious solution. You know, started by M-Pesa in Kenya. In Zimbabwe now, we are perfecting that. You know, and the mobile company that has taken it up. If you look at statistics, talk about statistics, we didn't have time to unpack. Within 9 months, they've moved from mobile transactions of about 300 million to 1.4 billion. And in Zimbabwe, we use US dollars, in just a few months, by working with what is already there. Where you have a situation where you just have your grocery shop out in the rural area there, becoming the bank itself. As long as there is cash which is already there, that becomes the bank, and you are already there. When you talk about a cellular company coming up with little shops which are prefabricated later, you just put a concrete slab there, you put the little prefabricated shop there. That is your bank. Anyone can do that, and at the same time you are empowering people, because those people in the communities are the ones that are running those things. Yes. So as you earn your commission as the mobile company, as the bank, the little men, the grassroots, are also earning something by participating in that whole cycle. So you are actually working with what is there. They are taking, you know, lights, you know, solar lamps for the rural areas. They have now designed them in such a way that they also have a charger for the cell phone. So out in the rural areas, when you buy your torch, you don't now need the electricity. It is the one that charges the phone. And for me, that is technology, appropriate technology, and not trying to recreate what has been done in New York out in the grassroots. And it has got quick wins and quick results. If you talk about basics in standard, you know, what is quality? Just meeting customer requirements. And that is basically the technology that we require, I believe.
Okay, so Kati and one sentence from Ashok, and you are on then Alan.
Well, just very briefly, really following on from what's just been said,
A bank is any organisation whose business is handling money. It doesn't have to be called a bank. And a lot of these banks that are handling exchange of money on mobiles and all the rest of it are essentially fulfilling some banking purpose or other. But I just want to say that we did spend quite a lot of time yesterday when we were talking about visions, and this morning looking ahead. I mean, the visions have a horizon in the future, and nobody wants the grassroots to remain at the size that it is now. The whole purpose of growth and development is to move everyone up so that everybody's position improves. And therefore you need a financial system which is going to allow you to do that. And so what I'm suggesting is that when we talk about inclusion, we don't just concentrate on those at the bottom, although they have got to receive a lot of attention, and they are doing with microfinance and so on, but we've got to concentrate on actually establishing efficient financial systems, efficient financial markets. Because as a country begins to manage more of its own resources, and Chris, you were talking about this yesterday in Zimbabwe, you are not relying on money coming in the ways that it used to. You are actually using your own resources. Now somebody's got to manage those resources, and therefore you need an efficient financial system. You also need, as you move up the development road, equity markets, efficient equity markets. This is something that Basil raised this morning when we were talking about growth. So all I'm doing is saying, okay, let's not fall out, but let's recognise that we need to look at the financial system as a whole, and we need to look at designing it for the future, and we need to look at designing it in such a way that you have more control nationally or regionally, you have more control over your own resources.
Okay, very quick one from Ashok and
No, a
then
new
Alan.
insight which I got I must share. Because so far in India we have never used supercomputer either by Reserve Bank or Planning Commission or anybody except for weather forecasting. So that's a complex system. It requires supercomputer. So today I have learned that maybe our supercomputer is not being fully used because they are using only for weather forecasting.
Shall we move on to quality?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Okay, we'll combine the two. Alan, you want to come here?
I have to navigate. I had understood the session this afternoon that we would like to concentrate on the three inclusion initiatives that we have been fielding on in the past 2 or 3 years, taking stock of some of the ideas and contributions we had in Dar es Salaam, and bringing the subject a bit further to see how we can expand on these 3 dimensions in the future. We have discussed a lot about financial inclusion this afternoon, but we have also touched upon the subject of technology inclusion with 2 examples which I think are quite interesting and illustrative of the subject of technology and innovation inclusion, and also of quality and standards. The voting machines. The voting machines are of no use if you don't have the infrastructure in place. Clearly, if you can't use them in the little villages, they are no use. So it's a question of infrastructure. So disseminating technology must be preceded by infrastructure. We will illustrate that. The other example was decentralized banking with the computer on a piece of concrete, connected to the internet, I suppose, Wi-Fi or through the telephone, mobile phone. Well, this is technology inclusive because it is a use of technology that is adapted to a decentralized approach of banking. There are many countries in Africa where there are many more mobile phones than bank accounts. I was told that in Namibia. We had, Excellency, 2 years ago, we had two very interesting sessions in Namibia on financial inclusion and quality and standards inclusion. So now to bring the subject to quality and standards and technology and innovation inclusion as a complement to financial inclusion, because this is really one of the lessons we have learned over the last 2 or 3 years, is that the 3 dimensions, in fact, contribute to economic and social transformation. You cannot just do innovation if you don't have finance, if you don't have quality and standards to enable innovation to be successful on the market. We had yesterday some presentations about what is innovation. Innovation is a successful an invention which is successful on the market. Now, from the dialogue in Dar es Salaam and subsequent discussions, I just want to feed the discussion this afternoon with a few ideas on subjects on which we could expand in the coming months with the future global dialogue in mind. On quality and standards. First idea is, we had yesterday an example on additive manufacturing. And I mentioned yesterday that this is a subject on which international standards are being developed currently to support the dissemination of these technologies and doing the standards straight away at the international level. And this, I could talk about nanotechnologies, I could talk about biotechnologies, I could talk about information technologies. Nowadays, in the world in which we live, the harmonization of practices, the interoperability, the testing of performance, most of that is done on the basis of international standards. And this is at the same time an opportunity and a threat for developing countries. And you have national standards bodies which are in fact your eye on what is going on the international scene of interest to your country. So quality and standards and technology. The second theme I want to bring up, because it clearly came out of the discussions we had in Dar es Salaam, was how do we add value locally? How do we unlock new sources of revenue, new jobs by adding value locally, not just exporting raw material or renting land to foreign companies to exploit the land. How do we add value locally? Well, I think this is one of the major themes for the Quality and Standards Initiative, also for the Technology and Innovation, also for the Financial Inclusion Initiative. How do we add value locally, creating jobs? And the situation today in the world, and it's interesting because one of the reading tips we had from CPTM for this session was about the future of manufacturing in the UK. And I have read the documents that were pointed to us. And we have, in many Western countries, developed Western countries, the same thing today. People are rediscovering the virtue of industry and manufacturing to unlock new sources of revenue and create jobs. And the UK, as you know, has gone very far in abandoning its industrial activities. There is an example today with a shipyard in Portsmouth, where there is a concentration of the shipyards in Scotland. Well, I'm half Scottish, and I can welcome this, that the shipyards are concentrating on the Clyde. What happens if Scotland becomes independent? So this report on the future of manufacturing in the UK is very interesting because it says that manufacturing has changed dramatically. And this is something to take into account when you are thinking of industrialization of your countries. I said yesterday that I was recently 3 weeks in South America. I was in Peru, and I had meetings with the government there, and the president of Peru is very keen on pushing forward the theme of industrialization, creating jobs. And it's a country which has a lot of mining resources and also gas, etc. And they have very similar problems to the issues you have in Africa. So, one aspect is that the whole world is working on manufacturing. So if you, in your country, are thinking of adding value, and when I say adding value, it's not only industry, it's also agribusiness, transforming the biomass, transforming products in order to increase the export capacity of transformed agricultural products, and also displacing imports. Because when I hear tourism industries who are importing cornflakes and cheese and bacon and so on from outside, the proportion of the dollar spent by the tourist is small. Now, if you increase the proportion of the dollar spent by the tourist in the country, of course, you increase your margin. And if you have quality products that you can serve to tourists, produced locally, it is important. So adding value locally is a second theme, I think, that came out of our discussions, and where the smart partnership approach, public-private, networking, etc., can be useful. And the third aspect I would like to underline, and then we can have an open discussion, of course, is the subject of governance. And when I say governance, I cover governance and management, because it applies to management of private companies, it applies also to national and local governments. And this is an area where, at the level of international standardization, some major developments are underway. I mentioned last time in Dar es Salaam the publication of the ISO 26000 on social responsibility. And I believe that a number of your countries are involved in social responsibility programs. There is now an international guidance document, there is a movement, and I think that the Smart Partnership movement should have a more attentive look on the subject of social responsibility, because I consider, and I'm not the only one, that it is about the relationship of an organization, whether a company or whether a government, with its stakeholders at large. And ISO has defined social responsibility of an organization as the individual contribution of that organization to the sustainable development of the planet. And now we have rather clear, and when you look at the agenda of the G8 or the G20, the subject of social responsibility is there. So it's a governance of organizations in general. And when it comes to companies, there is a major development underway in ISO currently, which is the revision of the emblematic standard ISO 9001 on quality management. This is under revision currently, and I think this is a subject on which everybody should look, because it's not going to be a revolution, it's going to be an evolution of that document, which is used in more than 182 countries in the world. So it is a major reference document. And another aspect that is underway in ISO relates to local governance. And I think that this is also relevant to the Smart Partnership, because local governments, and when I say local governments, it's municipalities, those governments which deliver services to the public at the grassroots level. So that's water, electricity, public services at large, which are delivered at the level of local government. And there is currently under vote in ISO an international standard which will be a guidance document for local governments on quality management. It has a very poetic name. It's the ISO 18091, which is very poetic, but it's an important document which has been developed using the expertise worldwide on management of local governments. So I could go on, but now I think that I have opened technology, innovation, inclusion, the role of international standards, and the intelligence you need to have, the selectivity you need to have, adding value locally, whether in agribusiness or in, by industrialization, and governance and management at the level of companies and at the level of local governments, because I think these subjects are quite topical and I think of interest and can benefit from the Smart Partnership type of dialogue approach. So just to introduce. And my mentor says that I should do something now, which is pass the floor to colleagues. So I didn't know I was in charge of that. Anthea and Lamkosi. David, but Argentina. So, my colleague,
David, you want David?
David will expand on. David, are you ready?
Happy Wednesday.
Okay, so the
Age before beauty.
standards and regulations.
Okay.
How do they fit together?
I'll do it from here if that's okay, with apologies to the Honourable Minister. It's a round room. I'll just talk about two things because Alan has teed up this discussion well, and I think we're all chomping at the bit to get into the meat of the discussion. So I'll keep it on to two things. One is about stakeholder engagement or networks for standardization. And today we'll rename that, we'll call that grassroots engagement because that's the theme of this afternoon. Well, I wasn't expecting. And then the second is about the way standards can work with innovation and the way we can embed innovation and build new industries with standards. So just a reminder of some of the things we talked about yesterday, that standards work with regulations, but they are not regulations. As regulators, you set minimum levels. The requirements that you need to keep your citizens safe are embodied in regulation. Standards are this ladder of opportunity, which can be a hand up for organizations to improve their performance, whether it's their economic performance or their environmental performance or their social performance. But standards are only good if they have the buy-in of all interested parties, and this includes the grassroots. Let me tell you a story from the UK from the 1950s. Just after the Second World War, there was a huge growth in electrical domestic products. There was a need for standards to ensure that these products were safe for the consumer, and BSI set up a committee of those people who were using the products, and we called it the Women's Advisory Committee. It was a different time, I apologize for the terminology, but at the time the users of domestic products were women, the manufacturers were the men, and the Women's Advisory Committee advised the manufacturers about the importance of thinking of the consumer, thinking at the grassroots level when they set the standards. And having that consumer voice within the standards organizations is not just a nice to have, it's essential to have. And it's not just the consumer voice, it's other elements of the grassroots. We've just set up in the UK something called the UK Sustainability Network for Standardization, which brings together interested parties representing environmental interests, from social responsibility to waste and recycling, energy efficient products, carbon footprinting. We've brought them together from charities, from NGOs, from government departments, researchers and academics, so that they can coordinate and have a strong voice from the grassroots level about the environmental performance of products. So it's absolutely essential that in the standards work that you might be involved with yourself or through your national networks, that they are inclusive of all needs. Because as the Honourable General Ellie said earlier on, if you leave it to the scientists to define, you get a very strange result and it's not always implementable, so you need to include all the stakeholders. Very quickly, let me talk about standards and innovation and standards and research. We're working on a project in Europe called Bridget at the moment, which is about bridging the gap between research and standardization, because we recognize that standards are a great vehicle for getting research out into the market and getting it used. So we're trying to bring those two elements together, and that's an essential part of the success of standards if we can manage that. We talked a lot yesterday about 3D printing, an industry which frankly hasn't touched any of our lives yet, and frankly in 20 years' time I doubt it will have touched many of our lives. But there's an industry that is 30 years old, effectively since the technology was first created. We now have international standards, as Alan has mentioned, but that took a very long time because the choice that was made by the industry was that they would protect their intellectual property through patents. They didn't use the alternative route, which is to share their knowledge through the standards process. So, and one could say that in this case, it has hampered the development of this rather strange and unique industry. Maybe if we'd had them open up to standards right at the beginning, when the technology was invented in the 1980s, maybe all of us who have a 2D printer in our office would have a 3D printer sitting next to it. We don't know. But that's an example of where it's absolutely vital to work with innovators and researchers to get standards in place for new ideas right at the outset. And we're working with industries that have not yet been created in the UK. As you heard, the UK is trying to move away from its old manufacturing base, and just as every economy is doing, trying to find a competitive advantage in an area where we can beat the world. So we're working with the research organisations in the UK in areas like synthetic biology, not to write standards today because we don't know what the products will be in the future, but to set a roadmap for standards, to set a strategy for standards. So we say that in 5 years, if this develops, you need these standards. You need protocols for how organisations work in this area. You need ethical standards. You might need vocabulary standards just to kick off the industry in the first place. So that's another way that we need to think about innovation. And too often we come too late to standards. If we think about standards as a tool to help to disseminate knowledge in society, then we'll come much sooner. I think I'll leave it there. Thank you for listening.
My intervention is more in terms of small economies like Barbados, in the Caribbean, and recognizing that or more, let me say how we would utilize the standards. Mention was made about manufacturing and so on in the Caribbean because of high cost overheads and so on. There is no way that we could mass produce items that would really make an impact in world trade because costs would be too high, so we could never compete successfully with the mass producers, China, etc., etc. So what we would have to do is, and it was mentioned, we would have to add value. So we then have to develop products for niche markets, right? So we would use the standards, and of course the standards are used for repeatability and reproducibility to ensure that the quality we can sustain and produce quality goods that are consistently, let me put it that way. And within the Caribbean, and I had mentioned this morning, so I can mention it now again, we are working together within our regional grouping. In the Caribbean, we have the regional grouping is the Standards Organization, CrossQ, CARICOM Regional Organization for Standards and Quality, comprising 15 member states of the Caribbean community, CARICOM. But I smile because CARICOM consists of some countries that are not strictly speaking in the Caribbean, but we do work together because we have Belize, we have the Bahamas, we have Guyana, and we have Suriname. And those are not in the Caribbean per se, but they are part of CARICOM. So we are working within CrossQ to develop regional standards to facilitate trade in the region, but also to ensure the competitiveness of the goods we produce in the Caribbean. And this is international competitiveness. So we do have a project that is ongoing where we are developing a quality infrastructure, regional quality infrastructure. And in essence, we are basically trying to ensure that each of our 15 member states does have a minimum quality infrastructure. The quality infrastructure comprises, and David would tell you, the 5 components are standards, metrology, testing, accreditation, certification. Not necessarily in that order, but those 5 pillars are very important. So we are working among ourselves with support. This is a project under the TBT component of the 10th EDF. You would have heard about the EPA and all of those things. And as I said, that basically is assisting our countries in establishing the infrastructure to ensure that the goods and services we produce are of internationally acceptable quality. So this is one of the ways we achieve our global competitiveness through networking among ourselves.
Yes, thanks, Mahela, for the opportunity. She's not here. I'm going to take you through the Swaziland's context of the standards implementation program. When you look at the whole value chain of our business, you find that there will exist a problem on the market. And from the standards perspective, we believe that you have to solve the problem by providing a standard that is going to provide a solution in terms of harmonization of whatever is not harmonized on the market. Then the standards body will write the standard in collaboration with the national stakeholders, regulators, academia, research institutions, consumers, and all those people. Then you'll have a national standard. Then someone has to implement that standard. And you find that because the subject of standards and quality is quite complex, the people that have to implement the standard have to be taken through a standards-based training course. So we started with a problem, we provided a solution. Now the solution has to be used, so the person has to be taken through a classroom training, sort of. And once they've been taken through a classroom training, then they have to go back to their factory or to their workplace or wherever the problem exists and apply the standard, implement the standard so that the solution takes the traction. And then once they've implemented the standard, which will be a period of about a year to a year and a half, then the National Standards Body or the certification part of the National Standards Body will come and certify the product or the system to say it complies to a standard, and we are hoping by that time, by applying the relevant standard, then the solution will have been applied and the problem will have been eliminated. And that happens in various sectors of the economy. Now, you will find that once the person has been trained by the National Standards Body in a classroom, they have to go and implement. And in that implementation stage, before they can be certified, it can't be the standards body helping you, holding your hand at your workplace or at your plant to help you implement the standard. So someone else has to come in there and help you implement, then the standards body can come and certify. Now, when I say at the beginning there's a problem, you find that in most situations people are saying it's bad luck. In Siswati we call it bad luck. A consumer will go and buy an electrical appliance and it will work for a week and it will break and they'll have to buy another one and the week after and the week after. And they'll just say, it's bad luck. You know, and whenever we speak as a National Standards Body, we say there's no bad luck. There's a lack of standards wherever you are. So either you are a consumer, you have this bad luck on the market, or you are an SME, you are borrowing 25,000 from a micro lender. You start a business, it closes down. You've got bad luck because there's a lack of standards there. If you are not aware of standards, you're like, there's something wrong with me. I'm just jinxed. You see. Then another person will be a subcontractor. There's a utility company selling electricity or water or whatever, or telecommunications, and you want a tender to subcontract for that big company, and you are not going to be considered for the tender because your business is bad luck. And we always say there's a lack of standards, and the big corporations always want to work with people that know about standards because the standards that they implement dictate that they work with, put people on their value chains that know about standards. So you won't get the tenders as subcontractor because you've got bad luck. Then you have big corporates that employ about 5,000 people to do work. And big corporates are driven by profit, they export, and they have to export quality. But you find that the people that they employ are on the lower levels of education. So you will find that there will be mistakes on the shop floor or anything, and they'll be fired. Because they don't understand the system of why they are fired, because the bigger company wants quality. So you have bad luck and you'll be fired from the big company. Now, then we'll have academic institutions that we are in the long term as a strategy trying to work with. So for all these people that have bad luck, we have decided as a national standards body that we need to transform the way they think. We need to make them realize that it is not bad luck. They are not jinxed. It is because they are not aware of standards. So we sit them down. So we are on a national program where we are teaching consumers on what to expect on the market and how to consume. We are teaching SMEs, and there's actually a big program on SMEs because SMEs make a lot of products. Some SMEs are making traditional medicines that they want recognized somewhere in some chemist shop to be sold. There's a big market and there's a big business now in Swaziland where they are making aloe ointment using a traditional aloe from the fields, and there's lots and lots of women that are involved in that. Then there's arts and handcrafts that has to be exported, fair trade, and all those things, and they are not aware what are they actually supposed to comply with. Then we have a lot of street vendors that need to. We are working with the municipalities to make sure that the street vending is organized in terms of implementation of standards. And then we're also working with the Ministry of Agriculture for exportation of goods like milk, honey, baby vegetables, and so on. So it says here, institutions and networks. As a national standards body, we've realized that we can work on our own. So we've scanned the landscape of Swaziland to say who can we work with, and we've partnered with all these organizations, and we're doing a lot of work with them. The challenge that we have is that we have a very low budget, yet we have a very big mandate. So what we do is we approach the organizations and sell them our services, make them attractive to them, and make them fund whatever needs to be funded. And we just come in with the human resources. And that has worked very well with us.
Longosi, and that is also to do with the inclusion part.
Yeah, it's all inclusive. Yeah.
Do you have standard behavior for husbands?
Take on Botswana. What's happening?
Just bad luck.
I like it.
It's just bad luck.
I think we also have bad luck. but for us, it's important to appreciate that the economy is fairly small, and standards play an important role if we are to access the market, and if we are to be inclusive in what we do. What is important for SMMEs right from the beginning is to make sure that they appreciate the concept of standardization, and to appreciate that it is part and parcel of their budgeting, and they include issues of standards in their accessing finances. Now, we have just done a small little research on how other countries are involving and facilitating for SMMEs to be functional in the particular area of standardization and quality assurance, etc. And so we are beginning to build a small, or we've made a presentation on how best they can best be assisted. But the important thing is making sure that financial institutions recognize that they should not only just fund the projects, but also fund the standards that, or the concept of standardization that go with those projects. If these small and micro medium enterprises are to access international markets. And so if we can focus on that, and if we can be successful in that, there are institutions in Botswana that facilitate for the funding. We have the local enterprise. It helps with the funding. They also assist in management of the businesses that are set up. So we collaborate with them and create, and hopefully create a small pool of what would become a reasonably successful SMME. What is important, I think, is maybe that should be the next question, is what market are we focusing as a country? Because you can have SMMEs all over the show, but you need to sort of hone on something that you are competitively or have a competitive advantage. And that's all.
Yeah, good question.
Omar was
The question.
no, Omar wanted to add to, and then.
Okay, but I wanted to ask the Southern ask.
Keep it there.
All right.
I want to, rather the topic is quality and standards. And we have been hearing up to now all about quality from the point of standards. I was wondering whether standards, quality can be separated from standards. I was thinking about inculcating quality as a culture and not necessarily conforming to standard, because some products cannot be standardized. I'm talking especially about the enculturing quality as a culture in the grassroots, particularly in micro businesses that cater for a very, very niche or local, very localized market or even national market. I'm referring particularly to food items such as food, because once you standardize that, then the creativity is gone, right? You cannot say if you are going to do chicken tikka, this is the only way to do it. It's not, because that gives you variety for you to be different. The same thing when you cook curry or whatever else you do. Last night I had a steak pie. First time ever I see it this way, because I'm used to a steak pie in a different manner. But if you say there is a standard for steak pie, I will get the same thing everywhere. So you cannot apply that, but you need quality. So I'm thinking maybe we need to, in certain area, you need to separate quality from standard. And a good example of quality is in Japan. Everything they do in quality is with quality. You go to a Japanese supermarket, any kind of food preparation is not just the food, but the packaging is always high standard. And there is no a high quality. There is no standard for that. Have you ever seen how a Japanese prepare an eel from a living squiggling animal into the thing that you eat on your table? There is a specific way they do it with high quality. Nobody wrote a standard for that. So this is what I'm trying to say, that we need to look at quality in a very specific manner as different from standard, because once you standardize it, then the creativity or innovativeness will disappear. Particularly food, maybe handicraft as well. I may be shot by Ellen because she's done. So please think about that.
Let me attempt on the question of quality versus standards. I think that basket over there looks like one that may have been produced in Botswana.
Yeah.
Now, you do emphasizing on quality. It's a craft, and therefore the standard aspect plays a secondary role or tertiary role. What becomes important is to ensure that the SMME maintains a certain quality to be able to access the market that they're hoping to access. So the two work together relative to the
particular environment you're operating.
That's what I want to hear, because all we have been hearing is about standard. Standard can be separated from quality under certain circumstances.
She's burning to say that.
Yeah, the challenge is that if it is the misconception really about standards, because standards do support quality, they are fundamental, but it depends on what aspects you are looking to standardize. Standards ensure repeatability, reproducibility. So in developing those particular items, even in terms of food items, it would not limit creativity, it does not stifle creativity, but you are ensuring that when that particular food item is prepared, it is wholesome. So you are looking at certain characteristics, and you are not looking at the final presentation, right? But it is the components and the ingredients.
You are supporting me,
right?
That should be emphasized, and not everything must conform to a specific standard.
To look one way, because it could conform to a specific standard, but the standard would not necessarily, it would not limit creativity. But you are ensuring that that food is wholesome. So the focus in terms of food for standardization is the wholesomeness. In terms of, say, even the craft, the standards will play a part in the raw materials. But you can then craft those into different areas or so. Even in terms of like the size of the product, they might all end up being, say that you are making a
chairman of size
for the table, they might all be the same size, but they can look different. So standards do play a part, but the final product doesn't have to look the same. So I don't want people to think that you can have quality without standards, but it is where or what role those standards play.
Yeah, I just wanted to add there, and colleagues will assist as well if necessary, that on the services, particularly on the services, Chairman, it's more on the quality management systems. You know, the ISO 9001 quality management system, and then for food particularly, there is the food safety management systems, yeah, which ensure that you know, people can be healthy, you know, especially in terms of preparing foods. And with globalization now, although there is uniqueness, but you need to be able to be assured of a certain safety standard in terms of food preparation. So that is there, and tourists are insisting on that now. And you find in the hotel industry, hospitality industry, it's a market, a big market for the standards bodies now in terms of food safety management systems. So in services, it's more about the quality management system rather than the product standards.
Isidore.
Yes.
Isidore.
Botswana, Lesotho, and Swaziland, you are part of the customs union. May I please know how your standards, Bureau of Standard Systems, relate to the big brother South Africa? And the same can be said with the Caribbean and maybe the UK in relation to the EU standards. How do these harmonize each other?
Economic partnership agreement.
If I may attempt that one, again, we are members of SADC, and under SADC, the SADC STAN, which is the SADC standardization wing of activities. This group meets to discuss what standards they would want to harmonize, and the same are harmonized. You also have an agreement or an understanding that if I adopt a standard and it is harmonized, then all of us will have to adopt the same.
How do you harmonize the
We go through the exact same process of inclusiveness, where the standard that is supposed to be harmonized is shared with the rest of the community within the SADC environment. They comment on it, they modify or contribute however way they may contribute, and an agreed finalization of the same, the standard then is a harmonized standard, or the product, the end product is harmonized. Now South Africa does not necessarily, by virtue of its economic or size in terms of population relative to the Southern African region, dominate us per se, because the concept of standardization is the concept that ISO has established. We all subscribe to the ISO body, and therefore we are basically operating under the same group. So,
Right, Capello, and then.
If I could also just maybe give some.
He's not from Standard.
Well, I do have a standards background, and what sort of I wanted to go to Omar's.
Standard background?
The standards background. To Omar's point about quality and standard. Standard quality by its nature is relative. The definition of quality is the ability of a product or service to meet stated or implied needs. So it can actually be, it is relative. There is no such thing as high or low quality. And that is where standards come in, to level the playing field. Then you can qualify it and say whether the standard is, the quality is high or low, once you've based it on what is the standard. So that is the relationship between the two. And so you can't really say something is high quality or low quality. What it does it meet the stated or implied needs of the customer? If you go and try to plow a field with a Mercedes-Benz 500 SL, you're going to assume it's poor quality because it's not going to do the job. Okay, so standards is a form then of leveling the playing field and providing a benchmark where you can then say whether this, to me, as the consumer, is high or low quality, is good or bad.
Okay. Can I? And then two others who are specifically special coming from.
Yes, I just wanted to make a follow-up to what Omar said. The culture of quality being inculcated in the way we, in our day-to-day lifestyles, so that whether I'm working or whether I'm a producer, a business person, automatically it's part of my nature to produce quality, which will, then you have the standards, blah, 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 blah. I was just thinking about it, that I was saying to Mihaela earlier this morning, I said, saying we are achieving quality and standards or inclusion of quality and standards, to me, I think we are losing it, because that should be part and parcel of our lifestyle. Unlike saying inclusion of financial inclusion, quality should be the way we think, the way we produce, the way we are. Whatever I'm going to do, quality should be part and parcel of my culture, so that even when we now start talking about standards, what I'm producing automatically is of quality. That should be my focus. So I was thinking that maybe we are losing it by looking at it the way we are looking at it. It should be part and parcel of our education. Children at primary school should, as part of their education, know about the importance of quality, so that they grow up knowing that whatever they have to do in their day-to-day lifestyle, they have to do things, produce quality. And once they go into business, then the aspect of standards and things like that, it doesn't become a problem. It's because it's part and parcel of their nature. It's only now I'm learning about this quality standards, and I'm saying, why is it just coming now? It should have been part of my education, my upbringing. Because I remember when we had our dialogue, our district dialogue, we were thinking of this, and then we said, no, even in our culture, traditional, the way we do our traditional things, if I come to Zimbabwe, I go to my Shonaland or Ndebeleland, there are certain things which are part and parcel of the way you have to behave in that culture. And if you do it differently, they'll say, no, 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 you don't belong here. So that means the aspect and element of quality has been there. It's just that we sort of now are looking at it in a different manner, but it has to be part and parcel of it has to be inculcated in our education system, in the way we live. That's all I want to say.
Okay, no, each one wants to put something, John, and then finally the...
Well, just one question, Omar. What happens if that chicken was expired, you know, because I knew somebody in 1960 who used divers to fish bully beef sunk in the Second World War and sell it to butlins at those days, you know, and they ate it. But I want to bring another aspect to this, is that when standards and quality are used for protectionism, because I have olive trees. Boy tried to export olive oil that is virgin, that's cold pressed, to the EU. During the mad cow disease, I did not eat beef here, and when we went to Uganda, we had a meeting with the president. He said, what's the first thing you did? I said, Your Excellency, I had a big steak, you know. Now, Ugandan beef that I saw, Ugandan cows, have no chance to eat anything but grass. God grown grass, you know, nothing. No artificial thing to give them this disease. But they could not sell 1 pound of beef here. So, where do we strike the balance? With people who taught us these standards and quality. When I grew up, I am sure I ate many times powdered egg, which was used during the Second World War. There was no expiry date on anything I ate anyhow. But I'm still all right. It's like the story of DDT. We all used to go around, you know. So, I mean, where do we strike a balance? Thank you.
We're just a lucky one.
John, before you come in, can I just say something? Can I just say something? Order, please. I think we need to listen down. No drum there. Yeah, okay. I just wanted to say to Alan, thanks a lot for bringing back focus on the issue of standards, quality and standards in relation to the issue of moving economies up the value chain. It's very important. If you're going to be pursuing that, yes, it's very important to be able to ensure that you pursue this. Now, there is a challenge in the area, maybe not so much in the mining area, but in the agro-processing, particularly when it comes to the issue of market access. I think we do find in trade that yes, you may produce, you may agro-process to a certain level. As far as your quality and standard platform is concerned, your product might be pretty good, of a high standard, but as it attempts to enter, whether it's the EU market or another market, there are various researches that are being done by consumer organizations. And these consumer organizations then bring up certain non-tariff barriers. They start to talk of flexitoxins, for instance, in terms of ground nuts coming in and various other things. And I just wanted to get an idea from you as to how, you know, from an international standards point of view, that will be addressed. Then secondly, the comment I just wanted to make, I was quite excited by your reference to the ISO, did you say 26,000? The one that relates to social responsibility. That seems to be quite interesting, because I was just thinking through and saying, couldn't this be incorporated, for instance, in, like in our case, we are finalizing a national corporate governance framework, with a corporate governance framework for the private sector. There was one that we put together for state enterprises, parastatal, and we've been working together with the private sector to put together a national corporate governance framework, which we hope can, once adopted, be incorporated in law in terms of the Companies Act and various other, just so you capture certain key tenets. And I'm thinking that perhaps incorporating some of these, elements, like the ISO 26000 or various other elements can add a lot of value, including even incorporating quality management in performance contracts between, the chief secretary and permanent secretaries, so that even as they carry out or implement policy, they are also alive to issues of quality management as well.
But Chris, let's be frank about it. How many of the cabinet secretaries, we bring you in, how many of the cabinet secretaries are kind of engaged into, or don't think that the Bureau of Standards are a technical arm and leave it to them to do whatever they have to do? This inclusion that we are trying to bring up through quality and standards in addition to financial technology. Yeah?
Mihaela, I think we are already 15 minutes late in
No,
your
that's
program.
okay.
So we have David, and I have just a few words to say on anything missing, and then we can go to the, because I think the presenter
No,
has
there are
arrived.
two others people who want to make a point.
Well,
Yeah?
1, 2, David, myself, and then
No, Henry
Henry also.
Yeah? And Henry has one about the statistics, yeah?
You're creating more questions. There was 4 questions I just want to pick up very quickly. On the point about social responsibility, I was in Indonesia last year, and they said it's the most sought after standard in Indonesia, is the ISO standard on social responsibility, because their companies are wanting to trade internationally, and they wanted to demonstrate that they've adopted the best guidance out there on social responsibility, and that's how they see that document. And on organisational governance, we're launching tomorrow a British standard on good corporate governance, BS 13500, and that's going to address the issue of what good looks like in terms of organisational governance. And we're hoping that one day that will become an international standard as well. On beef, I can assure my friend the General from Jordan that British beef is the most tested beef in the world. Unfortunately, there are no standards in place for beef. There are regulations. And it's the regulations that were breached in terms of BSE, and I'm sure we can do better, but the London restaurants are doing badly right now, so I recommend you to have a beef steak in London, which are beautiful. MPO is the point that she made about the educated consumer is absolutely critical, because if we wait for companies who are supplying consumer products to improve their quality, we'll have a long wait. It needs the consumer to be educated, and that means education for today's consumers and tomorrow's consumers. It's so that they will demand better from producers. But remember, the supply chain is an important way of implementing quality, and you find that the big companies are demanding from their suppliers ISO 9001 and other certification marks. But the original question was about how you harmonise across borders and stop barriers within a single market. And I understand that this is what's happening in Southern Africa. We've been through this process in Europe and replaced 60,000 national standards with 16,000 standards that apply right across Europe. It's a painful process, but those standards now are a way to comply with European legislation, and now legally it's not possible for us to write a new national standard that is in conflict with the European standard. So you've got to guarantee that there should be no non-tariff barriers caused by standards within the European single market.
Thank you. George,
just want to make a point about ISO 9001, the quality management standard. I consider it as a very important standard, and I call it the standard which serves as a passport to international trade. You have a standard about a product, and you sell that product, and you compete with the one imported. So it promotes trade. But if you want to do trade internationally, it's not enough to say that I have a good product to sell. It is according to the standard. They want to know who you are. And ISO 9001 tells you who you are. You are a reliable business. I was chairman of the Cyprus Standards for 9 years. I was on TV explaining the work of the Standards Organization, and I made a special reference to ISO 9001. And somebody called and said, now that I hear it, I have a problem. I was to export plastic items that I made to Germany. and the German trader considered them as good quality and good price and wanted me to sell it. And at the very end of the exchange of letters and so on, said, and I presume that you are certified to ISO 9001. And he didn't know what it is. So he rang up and said, Mr. George, can I buy the certification tomorrow? Because I'm losing this. So if he had the ISO 9001, he could sell immediately. So it took him another year to get the certification for ISO 9000.
Okay. Alan? And
yes, just a few words. I think we have captured a lot of quality food for thought this afternoon and for expanding our 3 inclusion initiatives. I just want to leave you with, since I have this point on anything missing, we haven't spoken very much about partnerships in the area of quality and standards. And I think that this
including networks.
And networks. And I will leave you with 3 models of partnerships that I have come across that are quite successful. The first type of partnership is between a retail company distributing food products and cooperatives and farmers working on the subject of producing quality transformed goods that can be sold in the retail shops. And there are several examples in Africa with big retail companies, Tesco or Carrefour, but also with more local companies. Second type of partnership is between big public companies, utility companies, or big multinational companies, mining or whatever, and SMEs in the country, working on increasing the level of quality, and this is quality culture, of suppliers, so that these companies can supply locally instead of having to import maintenance or services. And this is also, there are many examples of that type of partnership. And the third partnership is around the tourist industry, which I mentioned briefly, where at the level of a country, when you have decided that tourism would be a major source of income and development for the country, to have a partnership between the public, the private sector on the theme of quality. Quality of services, quality of products, quality of recreation activities, and so on. So maybe this is something we can work on within the Smart Partnership movement, is how we can foster partnerships to improve the quality culture. So I think that with this we have...
just one little bracket. John?
Sorry, this was supposed to be
No, just John.
Ellen wrapped it up.
Well, so we opened
no, then you close.
No, I have closed.
Ellen, sorry, I was going to come in before you. We sold to Sainsbury's from Malawi, our farmers. We were taught what to do by Sainsbury's. Managed, monitored, checked, and eventually fired. And that's another issue. It was a political issue that caused the fire. The point was that farmers who had never produced to a consistent standard within 1 year were supplying product on Sainsbury's shelves. By fast-tracking the process of what you need, where you need it, when you need it, how you've got to manage it, and by the way, monitoring what's happening in the field by computer, by internet. We didn't have internet, we had faxes in those days. But it was all managed and it was very effective. The farmers moved from peasant cottage system to an instant international standard in 1 year. It's not complicated, this needs management.
So thanks for illustrating the partnership and maybe we can foster this.
Let's see.
So
No, David Brown, do you think we've gone somewhere with new insights on both sides?
I think we are tired now.
Yeah, we are tired.
I'm sure that we are tired. Again, we had a very successful day. There's one more.
There's one more, which is outside this
One more
inclusion.
topic.
Outside this inclusion, and but on the financial.
Okay,
let's.
no, I think the discussions were okay. Let's just proceed.
Well, I'm not very sure exactly how I should introduce Jeff, but yesterday, when Jeff stayed near the Prime Minister, Jeff Morgan, yesterday a number of guests we had referred to Jeff, so there was quite a build-up. Now here is Jeff. I wasn't very sure exactly what to say about Jeff, except that a latest kind of thing that a smart reading tip that I send you all had an intriguing title, The Locust and the Bee. And well, he is the author of that. But what attracted me there before Dar es Salaam dialogue was he was reflecting on how to change systems and how to relate time, value, and relationships. And in all these kind of reflections that we repeat ourselves about complexity, and I think probably it's quite useful to sort of see what reflection has Jeff. Now, why is Jeff, in addition to the locust and the bee, quite important to listen to and to ask him the questions that you feel like? It's because a number of years ago, when we were trying to put some basis to delivering or carrying forward visions, and what is a vision, national visions, a national strategy, where do we put the smart partnership hubs in the Prime Minister's offices and so on. And we found that, for instance, in UK, there was an experiment to set up a strategy unit in Prime Minister Tony Blair at that time. Am I right, Jeff? Mm-hmm. And Jeff became that experiment, initiated that experiment. And all the other governments all over Australia and everywhere else, so South Africa and everywhere else, they tried to watch to see how that functioned. Later, Jeff moved on, but there was a delivery unit, right? Similar purpose, with just a slightly different, or maybe you will explain what that is. Again, in the smart partnership movement, there is a lot of kind of issue related to delivery of visions, if that's possible. Right now, Jeff is the head of Nesta Foundation, which is one of the most well-known think tanks, not only in Britain. He was also a founder of the think tank Demos, where yesterday you had the opportunity to listen to the social media and public security from CAT. So, Jeff, I don't know if you want to start with Locust and the Bee or whatever you want, but come here if you feel like.
Shall I stand over there?
Yes. Whatever you feel.
Whatever's easy. Okay. It's quite late and it's quite warm. You know so quickly. So I will be quite brief. And not monologue too much. What I thought I might do is first of all explain a bit where I come from, and then maybe just 3 or 4 sort of nuggets of things which may be of interest and may spark then question or disagreement or whatever. So, as Mihaila said, my career is a mixture of sort of 2 opposite things. So some jobs I've had sitting at the top of governments, here in the UK, in charge of policy for prime ministers, and working quite a bit around the world, often with prime ministers and presidents, on sort of central structures, looking down, and the other half doing the opposite, as involved in community projects, social enterprises, and so on, from the grassroots up. So I kind of see the world in these opposite ways. Both sides hate each other, and so I have these sort of 2 opposites within my brain, the top down and the bottom up.
Partnership.
Yeah, and I now have the very nice job. I run a thing called, which is the National Endowment for Science, Technology and the Arts here in the UK. It's not a think tank, we're actually a foundation with money, which is quite nice, and working a lot around the world from, in fact, Malaysia, we're just starting quite a bit of work, Brazil, China, India. We did a big study a couple of weeks ago on the Chinese innovation system, which which might be of interest to some of you. So just a few very brief sort of thoughts onto CPTM Smart Partnership territory. The first is really about strategy. So I was asked by Tony Blair to try and create a structure to do strategy. And in a way, our task was incredibly simple, but incredibly difficult. And in a way, it's still, I think, the hardest thing for a government is to know what exactly you're trying to achieve and how are you going to achieve it. I still spend a lot of time working with governments trying to get that precision on what really matters, what matters now, medium term, long term, and what does that require in terms of people, money, structures. In that, I learned again and again the basic mistakes which we repeatedly made in Britain, but I also see around the world. The most elementary one was thinking that a big fat paper document was a strategy. And all over the world, governments produce things called strategies, which are very detailed and very long, and nobody reads and have no impact on anything. So often the very best strategy never has a paper form. And yet many consultancies do very well producing these documents. And I see one of my roles is to put them out of business. And that's another matter. Secondly, we repeatedly found strategies being developed where no one in the room actually had any real frontline knowledge of the thing being talked about. And one of my depressing experiences still around the world is how many governments, the key decisions are made with literally no one there who knows how this will actually work literally on the ground in a farm or a school or a prison and so on. So we tried these basic principles. How do you do strategy which taps kind of frontline knowledge? Just as important, within any government, however clever the politicians, however clever the civil servants, there will always be more brain power outside than inside. So how do you tap into that brain power to help you frame your issues, frame your ideas, and so on? And we're at the moment doing quite a lot of work on new technological tools for tapping collective intelligence, experts, etc., in decision-making processes. And I'm at the moment very excited that now all sorts of things are possible which weren't actually possible 10 years ago on that front. Anyway, lots more to be said about that. And as you said, Mihaela, we did a lot of experimentation on how you create, in a sense, just a sharper link between the high-level goals of, let's say, raising educational standards, your targets, your metrics, your teacher training, and finding out what was actually happening. And then when it turned out your policy was wrong, how do you quickly change it rather than, as most governments do, pretend it's still working even when you know it's not working. So I'd be interested to talk more about all of that. But one of the biggest things I learned doing strategy was that there was quite a limit to how much we could do top-down, even the very best strategy. And a lot of what I've been working on more recently is almost the opposite. How can a government stimulate experimentation, innovation on the ground, which can then help you change your strategy and make it smarter? And some of this we've done directly through Nesta. Most recently, we've been working with Michael Bloomberg, who stepped down yesterday from Mayor of New York, looking at what we call the I-teams, the innovation teams within national governments and city governments, where there's a unit set up not to design a strategy, but to stimulate essentially creativity and experiment on the things which matter most to the political leaders. Bloomberg did this very well in New York on things like economic opportunity for young people. And we've been looking at teams in many countries, Korea, Malaysia. I was in Colombia 2 weeks ago, which has got some very interesting things going on. And usually these teams operate in an almost opposite way to traditional bureaucratic structures. They operate very fast. Some of the ones in the US at the moment try to get from an idea to a first implementation within 6 weeks, which is unthinkable in most governments. And so they try things often very small, but very fast. But it has to be in a real life environment to see if it works. They're nearly all very data driven. They try and quickly measure if their idea works or not. And they have a sort of, and they're nearly all made up half of civil servants and half people brought in from outside. business entrepreneurs, technologists, and so on. So two very different examples, just to give you a flavour of this. In Korea, the innovation team in Seoul has been working on an extraordinary range of projects, but one of them is simply creating car sharing platforms. So the citizens of Seoul don't all have to buy a car, they can use the internet to share their cars in intelligent ways. And it's spread right across the city, very, very fast, very low cost, and of course frees up a lot of spending power for the citizens of Seoul. The other one, which is also car related, is slightly mad, but I'll tell you about it anyway. It's in the city of Boston, where they've developed an app which people can download onto their phone, and this then spots if you're in a car and you drive over a hole in the road, because the phone goes like that, and it sends the data to City Hall, which then knows where to send people to fix the road. You know, both of these are interesting because they mobilise citizen power, citizen input to save money for the bureaucracy. And there are hundreds of examples of this new spirit of innovation. And a lot of the work we're doing at Nesta with the UNDP and others is spreading these innovation methods around the world, because on every topic which matters, as I said, however clever the people in the government, if you can mobilise lots of experiment and innovation around you, you get better ideas to inform your policy. The third thing, though, to mention is, of course, it only makes sense to do experimentation if you have some way of knowing what works, what then deserves to be taken into policy and programs. And most experiments fail, or even if they look quite good, you know, like the street bump one may look quite promising, but it may end up sending you far too many signals. There's too many bumps in the road. So we've been working a lot in the last 2 years on evidence. How do we get evidence more effectively into policy? And this may not, I don't know how relevant this will be to you. We've created, I think, the Alliance for Useful Evidence, which now has 1,500 organisations in it, in the UK, all the ones creating evidence on what works in policing, in local economic growth, in caring for the elderly. And we've persuaded the government now to create a network of what works centres, there's 6 initially, to act as really semi-independent places which will provide information to a police chief or a head teacher or a policy maker or a city on what works and what doesn't. This shouldn't be necessary at all. It should be easy to find out what works, but when we've actually interviewed the people responsible for almost every area of public policy and delivery here in the UK, they simply don't know what works. They don't know what the evidence is. So they often try things which have been proven not to work, although they sounded good. Or they'll be in a neighbouring town, something incredibly good and they haven't heard of it. So even in the age of Google searches, it's amazing how inefficient our basic systems are for knowledge and for helping people adopt someone else's really good idea. And I'm ever more convinced this age belongs to the people who are shameless about stealing other people's good ideas. And indeed, Steve Jobs, who's often presented as a brilliant creative innovator, and in some ways he was, in reality was much better at stealing other people's ideas and putting them together well. Every single element of the iPod he took from someone else. But that's a good thing to do, not a bad thing. So interested in your thoughts on evidence and how we make that part of the daily life of everyone, at every level of an administration. So it's just as a matter of course, you are aware of what is known worldwide about what to do, what works and what doesn't. Should be obvious, but isn't. So, last couple of minutes on the locust and the bee, which you introduced me in relation to. This is a book which...
Who's a locust?
This is the big question. We all have to choose whether to be locusts or bees. So this book originated, came out this year. It's published by Princeton University Press. And it was my attempt to make sense of the economic crisis, what had caused it, but much more importantly, how we could get out of it. How could we avoid repeating the errors of the 2000s, which have destroyed so much value across the world. And in a nutshell, I actually went back to Adam Smith, English economist of 250 years ago. And Adam Smith is thought of as the great advocate of the free market, and he was, but he was much subtler than that. He showed that in every real market, there will be incentives for business people to make really useful things for people, to sell them to them and make a profit, but there are also very strong incentives for them to rip people off, to take advantage of people, to be predators. And it's in the nature of every market that you will get both the creators and the predators, both the bees, the industrious bees, and the predators. Now the reason this matters, it matters for governments, because exactly the same I think is true in governments. Governments can be bees and creative, or they can be extremely effective predators on their citizens, taking their money, their lives, their goods, and so on. But in business, you see a constant sort of struggle between the predators and the creators, the bees and the locusts. And often economic crises happen when the predators become too strong. In the last decade, this happened in finance, where finance, which is meant to be a service for the rest of the economy, like electricity, an input, became all-powerful. They had the biggest towers in every city, their pay went through the roof. By the middle of the last decade, nearly half of all corporate profits in the US were finance, which should never have been the case. And in sector after sector, finance was actually sucking value out of the economy, not putting it back in. And of course, if one part of the economy is sucking value out, it's not surprising you then get crises and crashes. And I showed again and again through history this has happened when the predators have got out of control. And we also showed in our statistical analysis, perhaps more surprisingly, so I think people know about the predatory excesses of finance, investment in the creative side of capitalism actually shrank and stagnated. Certainly in the US and the UK in the 2000s, investment in innovation stalled and even fell. Companies chose to hoard cash rather than investing in new technologies and new services and new ideas. In this country, they put more money into buildings because they could speculate on them rather than, again, new technologies. So our whole economy globally, at this period when you'd expect there to be a flowering of innovations, in fact, shifted towards the predators and away from the creators. Final point, in a way, follows from that, which is the prescription. I think it's becoming more and more clear that the only coherent economic policies in any part of the world now have to be pretty tough in stopping predatory behavior, whether that's by financial companies, mining companies, or for that matter, some of the big technology companies which are moving from being creators to predators in some cases. You've got to rein that in, otherwise value sucks out of your economy. But you've also got to do much more to invest in really the capacity to generate knowledge and innovation. So I mentioned at the beginning, we've just finished this work on the Chinese innovation system. China is massively increasing its investment in formal R&D, in science and so on. It now has the world's fastest computers are in China. But probably more important is the way they're developing new methods of innovation, often below the radar of sort of big science around manufacturing methods, service methods, web-based methods, and so on. Last year we did a big research study on the Indian innovation system, showing how India was developing innovation methods actually superior to those of Britain, Germany, Silicon Valley, which we actually needed to learn from them and apply them to our own challenges. Often much cheaper methods of innovation and often to generate cheaper solutions, whether cars, computer tablets, drugs, and so on. But the crucial point, both India and China know that their future economic prosperity depends on a step change in their mobilization of their own citizens' brainpower. And that will need new methods, it needs a bigger share of public spending, not just on education, but on R&D. And above all, this is my final point, which links to where you started, almost everything about innovation economies is about the orchestration of networks. How do you get the knowledge and the ideas to flow between universities and big business and small business and citizens themselves? And even governments, yes. And in many countries you'll have pockets of brilliance, but they're not networked. And so you don't get the value out of them. So a lot of the craft of governance in the next 10 or 20 years is really mobilizing those flows of networks. And this is quite difficult. And again, it's very different from many of the administrative skills kind of I was brought up on. So I started my life as a civil servant in British government, local government, and in Brussels. And this is, I think, why what you're doing is so important, because these are to make people bees are not locusts. The sort of networking collaboration skills, which were things on the margins of government even 10, 20 years ago, are increasing actually the central skills you need to master.
So the scarcity is related to networks rather than any other.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Fine.
Thank you.
I don't think I need to orchestrate who speaks first. Any Deputy Prime Minister? Any immediate reaction?
Yeah, you know, it's very interesting. I don't know whether you have got a written text on this antagonistic partnership. It's different from the partnership we have here. But you see, in my local language, bees are always compared with prosperity because they always build.
Yeah.
And they are always there. But locust is a curse.
Yeah.
They are never there every time, but when they come, it's so destructive. I was thinking that this is important, that we maybe have some sort of a sharing process between or platform between the governments and the public. You see, you have referred to the financial crisis, and I think it have not ended. In the United States, it seems still to be continuing. And it is important that we educate our people, both in governments, in the private sector, and the public individuals, to at least turn this antagonistic partnership into a more conducive environment where we have to respect, you know, the interests of each other and complement each other. Because many times the locust knows exactly what is going to happen after 10 years, but they continue exploiting, you know, the bees. And when it happens, when disaster happens, they of course have different excuses, and education may at least maybe harmonize the antagonistic type of relations to our concept of a win-win situation as partners. Thank you very much, madam.
Thank you, David.
In nature, there is always the creators and the predators. But there is smart partnership there because there is a balance. The only time when the predators overwhelm is when we introduce something new into the ecosystem. So when you translate this into the way human work, there isn't that balancing mechanism. So smart partnership must be the balancing mechanism. This is why we think what we are doing in terms of promoting smart partnership is very important. So thank you for bringing this out, because now we have to think that part of the responsibility of the smart partnership movement to create that balance. Now to go back to your new application, in my country, there are people working on the road, not filling up the pothole, but digging up the road everywhere. In front of my house almost every week somebody comes and dig up the road. Now I know how they find which road has no potholes.
Just one other comment on that about to say I keep bees. I'm a beekeeper, so I feel very. I'm not a locust keeper. About nearly 10 years ago, we launched me and a friend a little website here called Fix My Street, and it's very simple. It's a website, and if you see a hole in your road, you put a geo marker on Google Maps on it, and then we developed it so it would then send a message to the local municipality, but everybody could see where you had put the marker and could see you sending the message and could see if the municipality responded and promised to fix it. And that's now spread, I think, to about 30 or 40 countries around the world. And it's another solution to the same problem. It cost maybe £1,000, almost nothing to do. So cheap and much more efficient than every municipality having sort of road inspectors, because you mobilise the people like you who care about it.
Was that year when the Conservatives lost so many municipalities?
Let me just, Ellie will come in. When we were trying to support countries on emerging national visions and carrying them, and we had a whole discussion about it again, and you dimensions. Of course, everybody said, why doesn't Britain have a vision? Do they have a vision? How do they do the vision? Was the vision related to this experimental strategy or what do you feel about visions? Anyway, national vision, never mind Britain.
Well, different political leaders have different appetites. So Tony Blair was very keen to have quite an explicit long-term vision, and he got every department to set 5 and 10-year strategies, which had a sort of explicit description of what they wanted to achieve in transport or health or the economy. He certainly thought that was useful for sharpening thinking about priorities and policy and budget setting. I think since the financial crisis, almost all governments seem to, the Western world, has stopped doing that because their horizons have shrunk right in. They're surviving, month to month, year to year. And certainly the current British government doesn't have a vision. The Americans would love to, but can't. In France, François Hollande, oddly enough, has got a commission at this very moment who by January have to come up with a new national vision. But I think we're in a period when it's harder just because of the level of economic volatility. But as soon as that's over, I think there's a great advantage if you can be clear on that vision. It's much better, though, if you can involve as many people as possible in shaping it. If it just comes from the head of your president, then don't be surprised if not many people think it's theirs. And it's got to kind of align with what's most authentic about a nation and its experience and its history. And again, so around the world, there are a lot of kind of fake visions.
Yeah.
And getting one which really feels mobilizing and real is quite a hard job.
Thank you very much. I'm a beekeeper too. 2003, like the Chinese was my year of the bee. At the personal level, I designed clothes with bees. But it all started from when a colleague of mine taught me about bees and how they do their work and how they relate to one another. The exciting one was that when a bee stings you, the soldier bee, it inevitably dies. It pays the ultimate sacrifice because the sting is attached to its stomach, to its intestines. So it really sacrifices its life for the sake of the
suicide bomber. Suicide bomber.
But if you knew where honey comes from, you would not eat it. So sweet, but it gets it collects from all different sources. Now, the specialization within the beehive is amazing. The work of the queen and the drone is specific. Only to produce young bees. The workers are specific, then the soldiers are also specific. And each one does its work for only that work, and they coordinate. And they balance, talking about smart partnership, they maintain a temperature in the beehive by everyone contributing its part. When it is cold, they all gather and warm the beehive. When it is hot, they all come and fan the beehive, each with its wing, and they form a fantastic fan to maintain the same temperature so that the manufacturing within the beehive of the honey is not interrupted. Now, it explains the science of how smart partnership works. You don't all have to be scientists, you don't have to be artists, you don't have to be soldiers, but each one of us can contribute for maintaining harmony and comfort within the beehive. And I don't know of any human being which is as useful as the bee. Did you know that if the bees were all killed, like the modern destroyers are doing, using all sorts of things, including perfumes, there would be no life?
Humans would only last a few years.
Humans would not survive without the bees, because they are the ones which pollinate the plants. The biggest work of the beekeepers in America is for hiring the beehives during the flowering season of the gardens, because the plants must be pollinated by the bees. Are we pollinating the world?
Very simple. In fact, I have ardent readers of all your reports, and I know that you had also taken help of my earlier organization in Delhi, Nestats. My question was really in relation to the other book, Bees or the Architect. Now, there the connotation of bees slightly different from yours. So where do you place yourself? That context?
Well, then in a way, I think if I'm understanding your question, right, it's how much do you allow things to happen automatically? Just let markets do their work, or how much do you shape things? And let me give a very specific example, which I think is almost a model of where we need to go in the future, and which is half and half. And it's where I spent the first half of my afternoon working on. We've been increasingly at Nesta using what are called challenge prizes. So for example, we did one with the UNDP in Bosnia, where we said people, refugees who were in mobile houses, needed a kind of a renewable energy source because they were nowhere near grids. And with these challenge prizes, you say anyone who can come up with an invention which can demonstrate effectiveness against some precise criteria will win a certain sum of money. And we've now run dozens of these on everything from old age to bicycling to electricity movement. There's one last week we were running. And today I was with the data world. We're doing quite a lot of uses of smart data. Now the point... Sorry?
What is smart?
This is open data. So last week, just down the road, 60 countries were here talking about opening up public data sets to create value for citizens. And we're running prizes. So for example, on unemployment, can you use official job statistics and data in interesting ways? The point about the prizes is you do them completely openly. So anyone can bid. You don't have to be a professor in a university or a big company. And nearly always with these prizes, the people who end up winning are not people you've ever heard of. They are the outsiders. But also, for these prizes to work, it turns out you can't just have it completely open and say we'll give a prize to whoever has the best idea. It's not completely bee-like in that sense. You often need quite a structured process where the person who has the beginnings of a good idea is given a bit of help, a bit of mentoring, a bit of coaching, a bit of support to turn their germ of an idea into something very useful. So it's the same with all the crowdsourcing platforms. I don't know how many of you have them. Many governments, many cities have these. In my view, most of these fail because they don't have enough of that structured help and guidance to turn the germ of a good idea into something really useful. So there's a combination of architect and bee, I think, is where we most need to go in solving almost any public problems. Tap into the intelligence of the whole hive, but then maybe a bit like the queen, you know, do a bit of shaping to turn it into something really useful.
You said the craft of governance to mobilise is going to be required to mobilise the craft of networks. And because we're a network, the sort of tone of yourself and Mihailo was as though networks are benign. But of course they're not all. And one can see to some extent the way in which networks are beginning to work against government and are becoming powerful. I'm not saying more powerful, but powerful. I mean, looking at Egypt and Syria, for example, more Egypt and Syria, where the network is being used as a way to mobilize people in opposition to the government. So were you, in your own mind, were you thinking of both the benign and malign types of networks or purposes of networks?
Yes. Well, we live in a world where networks are far more a central organising principle than they were a generation ago, just because they're ubiquitous. We're all on online networks, Facebook, Twitter, you name it. And as that's happened, networks have become the main organising device for bad as well as good forces. Organised crime brilliantly uses computer networks to do all sorts of things. As you said, terrorists try to, they're not nearly as effectively, I think, as someone's sometimes claimed. So it's the same as you would say about hierarchies or corporate organisations or religious structures. All of these things can be used for good or ill. The key, though, is not to see sort of networks as the enemy, is to become smart about how do you use networks for good effect and how do you block the predatory tendencies which come from networks too. So, one example of predatory behaviour on networks is cybercrime, which requires an entirely new set of skills in governments to block predation along networks and to know which countries are encouraging it. But most public policy tasks also require smartness around networks. And again, just to give a concrete example, I was talking to some people from Mexico the other day. Mexico now has the world's highest level of obesity. Most policies on obesity haven't worked very well anywhere. Indeed, Mayor Bloomberg, who was obsessed with cutting obesity, he brought it down and it's now started going up again, just as he's left office. But one of the approaches to obesity, which is proving promising, is to actually spot the people who are key in local networks who influence others and target public health not at everyone, but at the key kind of nodes of interpersonal networks. And this turns out, if you can do it well, to be much more efficient than traditional blanket public health. But there's thousands of examples. Of course, networks are bad as well as good. But that's the reason to be even smarter about networks.
Okay. Henry.
Thanks for the presentation. Just two very different questions. The first one relates to your theory of the financial crisis. Did you apply it and is it consistent to all the crises we have realized so far? Britain, for instance, in '74. Asia one, the more recent one. Is it something you say you could trace and say that actually clarifies the experiences which the world is facing on this financial crisis? That's the first one. The second one, I I guess we know it, but sometimes we don't quite think about it. That most of these developed countries don't really have an explicit vision. Are you saying Britain actually has no historical effort to mobilize for a common national vision? But it's just the political parties which come then and try to argue for something over 5-10 years or something like that. But there's total absence of a national vision.
Well, they're both really good questions to which I don't really have good answers. On the first one in my book, I do show how the really big crises of the Western economy, so in the most recent one in the late 1920s and in the 1870s, all did have this pattern of predatory behaviours getting out of control. And I've been trying to persuade some economists to do the much more detailed analysis than I was able to test this. Unfortunately, modern economics, despite Adam Smith, doesn't have a coherent understanding of predatory behaviour. And it's a massive gap in the whole current theories of economics, is it can't distinguish, it's very bad at distinguishing good from bad networks, good innovations from innovations which destroy value. It's a fundamental intellectual failing of economics. And there are some people trying to address it, but at the moment they literally don't have the concepts, I think, to answer your question rigorously. As to which nations did well or thrived with or without visions, many have done reasonably well without explicit visions. Britain, at various points in its history, has had sort of coherent visions, and probably its greatest period of all, the second half of the 19th century, there were in some ways very explicit visions. They manifest themselves in 1851 in the Great Exhibition, when there was a very public display of what was hoped for in terms of technology and industry and engineering and skills and so on. And arguably the period of most successful institution building and infrastructure building in British history was guided by a pretty widely shared sense of national vision, even though nothing was published which said this is the UK's national vision. And there again, arguably after the Second World War, another time when there was arguably a sense of institution building which then did survive 50 or 60 years, it had a conscious sense of national vision. Other countries, have sort of done it okay without anything very explicit. This would be, again, a great topic for an academic to research, and someone probably has done it.
Moses from Tanzania.
Thank you very much for a fantastic presentation. You did mention about collective intelligence, which is a technique where you can harvest data. Are you using collective intelligence to shape a policy or to help to craft new policies? And where is the boundary between collective intelligence and surveillance?
And
surveillance.
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, this is one of those questions I could give you an hour-long answer, which you definitely don't want now, because this is the territory I'm most working on at the moment. There's a lot of experimentation going on different, mainly technologically based tools to attack brain power. So some of these are quite specific. So, for example, the US platform for doing patents, patent applications called peer-to-patent, and now allows people to comment and improve. And I think most people would agree that's a clear improvement on just having the patent office officials doing all the work, because you're tapping into a lot of specialized knowledge which otherwise you wouldn't get. And there are quite a few fields where, say, specialized problem solving by governments is made more open, more transparent, and a specialist community contributes. At the other end of the spectrum is an example, like in Finland, a thing called the Open Ministry, which is trying to allow the whole of the public to comment, to propose legislation, to comment on it, to help it through to implementation. Iceland tried this with its constitution a year ago, a very interesting story. And we're now working with W3C, which is the World Wide Web organization, on designing new platforms for democratic assemblies to to help them do this more open decision making, partly learning from examples like Finland, Germany's done a bit, Estonia's done a bit, and so on. And so next year we will have something which anyone can copy or adapt for, let's say, sort of the parliamentary part of the answer to what you said. And there's then a whole plethora of, say, these open sort of crowdsourcing platforms where a city will say, we've got a problem with, I don't know, water, do you have any ideas? And on those, I think all the experiences, it's the combination of the online, but then offline physical meetings and processes seems to get to the best ideas. How do these overlap with surveillance? At the moment, I think most of these are fairly sort of safe, if you like. They don't have much overlap with surveillance because it doesn't matter that much who is making the inputs. And so you don't actually have identity verification, etc., and so on. But quite quickly, many of these will get into very tricky territory, like do you have to have a validated identity to take part? And if so, who has access to finding out who's been making which points? And as I sometimes remind people, it's only in the US, certainly, and I think in this going to be a bit later, the secret ballot was only invented in the mid-19th century. It was called the Australian ballot. In Australia, who claimed to have invented it, although, in fact, others have got there first. So that notion that you need identity protection for democratic participation has not always been there. That's a short answer. This is a field which I think is going to develop very, very fast. And a lot of what was assumed, for example, about the wisdom of crowds and crowdsourcing turned out to be wrong quite quickly. So I would advise most of the books on this topic are wrong, which is not a very helpful thing to say. But it's yeah.
Just about the financial crisis. Was Vince Cable trying to check the predators when he tried to warn Mr. Brown about a possible coming crisis?
Yeah, actually, very consciously.
Omar, yeah?
Vincent Cable is it's a very similar analysis to me.
Well, I'm very glad because he's a smart partner.
Yeah.
He's been here often. Yes, thank you.
Okay. Brainiac. Jeff is very well known as supporting youth, the Young Foundation. We have what is called Smart 29ers. Immediate in relation to your colleagues since the
Well, okay, yeah,
he's an architect, yeah?
I'm an architect. I heard about
under 29.
the book that he mentioned, which I think I should read. I also heard yesterday about your role with, I think the center in Cambridge, or was it with Carl?
But also the Center for Science.
Also the Center for Science and Policy, and that you have, and that David mentioned for us yesterday, and that there are two particular roles. There's a junior fellow role within the center, and also I think a principal fellow for the higher, boardroom level type people. And I think within this movement as well, as you can see, I think you've probably heard the history of it, that it grew out from the 70s in different formats within the Commonwealth and the like, and then later in the 90s to become CPTM, mainly drawing, highly skilled people from various sectors within civil service and government, and many of the founding people you can see some of them within this space. And I think more recently, within the last 5 years or so, there's been a conscious effort to get younger brains involved within this movement, within the Smart Partnership movement, and I'm one of those people. I'm alone at the moment. I think that I think Sven was here yesterday. Moses somewhat, Tapelo somewhat, but we're quite a wider group, and we've been called this Smart 29ers link, just as an avenue to bring more younger people within the movement and more younger current thoughts for example, some of us are more akin to the collective intelligence that you've talked about, and we practice some of these things. We download apps every day. Although my father there with an iPhone, I'm not sure how many apps he has on his phone, but but I download them and I try and show him every day. So there's that kind of cross. I try to show him how more useful his phone is as opposed to just sending SMS and calling, you know. So there's I guess that kind of cross-pollination of
young blood.
Younger practices, I like to call it, younger and more current practices, but also you know, bringing that together with the better wisdom, with more, yes, exactly.
But the issue was
yes,
that in the last so many years, the 29ers, the youth, obviously they were brought in for continuity, for all the rest of it. But even today, we haven't been able to find a way for them to have